Welcome in to the Rockies Insider. I am your Rockies Insider, Patrick Lyons, and joining me to cover this post-weekend series wrap against the New York Yankees is my good friend and colleague from Just Baseball, Kevin Henry. What's going on, bud?
Mr. Lyons, how are you, sir? Good to talk to you.
Doing well. I feel like I'm doing better than a lot of the neck regions of some of the Rockies pitchers today, giving up 5 long balls to some big dudes in that Yankees lineup. But despite the big loss on Sunday, there was a big win on Saturday that will also break down. So a little bit of everything. And in a season where the Rockies hurtle towards 100 losses again, those silver linings, sometimes can be a lot brighter and a lot more valuable to them. And we did see that on the win on Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, today was the first day that really that Yankees offense that, we know is so powerful got cranked up. So, like you said, if you're looking for a silver lining, it is the fact that while they lost 2 of 3 in the Bronx, at least it was not something that the ball was just flying everywhere until today, of course.
Yeah, if we're looking at run differential for Saturday and Sunday, we'll forget about Friday's loss. But if we're just looking at run differential, it breaks out to even. So Rockies win by 7, 9-2 on Saturday. They lose 10-3 on Sunday. And Austin Gomber, was good. He was fine. He entered the game tied for the most home runs in the National League, and highlighting it, earlier in the week on the Rockies Insider podcast. Hey, the Yankees hit lefties really well. Judge Soto doing a wonderful job from the left-hand side against lefties. And then, of course, Judge and Stanton are going to hit lefties really well. So the Rockies had a lot on their hands going into the series.
And, of course, there's another lefty I know we're going to talk about who got hit pretty hard today and has been getting hit pretty hard as well out of the bullpen with Lucas Gilbreath. So definitely we'll chat about that, I have no doubt.
It's true. A silver lining for Austin Gomber, which it seems like there usually is one in these games. Bottom of the 5th, gets into a jam, loads the bases, walks Soto and Judge, which seems ill-advised to go back-to-back, but those guys, you don't necessarily want them to beat you. You want to force somebody else. He gives up a single to Giancarlo Stanton, and then we have a bit of a timeout, a break, a scary scene, in fact, as Giancarlo Stanton's broken bat single ends up coming back and hitting home plate umpire Nick Mahrley, who ended up exiting the game, had to get carted off. You might have seen video of it already. Drew Romo immediately turning around and reacting to Mahrley getting hit in the head with that broken bat. Yankees trainers come out, and for the rest of the game, they just operate with 3 men and Hunter Wendelstedt behind home plate.
Yeah, it was something that, like you said, very scary, especially at the time, and certainly sent every good thought possible their way. But it was something that, I know that there was a ball in play when that happened as well. And so I saw the runner take to third, and I couldn't tell if he stopped just because he knew something was going at home plate. But obviously there was not even I'm going to tease you like I'm going home. I mean, because he saw something was going on there.
Yeah, you're right. It seemed like baseball was not the biggest thing in that moment. It was scary. Romo not worrying about a throw possibly coming in, which he can adjust to. Would that have happened a second or two later? But his initial instinct is, to be compassionate towards the umpire, towards his colleague. Look, they work together. They're a team. Romo's protecting Mahrley in the back, and Mahrley's going to do the same for Romo if there's a foul ball or whatever it is. So you're right. That was one of those moments. So you have a big, long delay, and Gomber's just sitting there waiting, and you figured, again, with the Yankees bats heating up right now, that it was going to be really bad, somewhat catastrophic for Gomber. It wasn't. He ends up escaping the jam, strikes out Jazz Chisholm, who just came back off the IL for the series, and then gets a ground out from Anthony Volpe. So a positive thing you can take away from the start there from Austin Gomber, who ends up going 6 innings, just misses out on the quality start, allowing 4 runs, and only gives up 1 home run there to retake the lead from Andrew Abbott for most home runs allowed in the National League.
But I do think, you're exactly right. I think that this is something that if you look at the box score, you go, okay. But at the same time, it's something that Gomber, will build upon now coming back home for this homestand that's coming up where we get another American League East team that's near the top of the standings. But I do think that overall, if you look at the pitching performances starting pitching performances, I should say, in the Bronx. I think that the Rockies should be very happy with the way things turned out in Gotham.
I can't imagine what the psyche is like of a Rockies veteran starting pitcher right now, or what it was like last year when they needed depth in a major way. You're almost not even going out there to win the game. I think you are. I think you've got that mindset, but at the same time, all right, well, if I'm not on, I've got to be at least decent so I can get some length. And Gomber here giving up 4 runs in the first 2 innings, bounces back and puts up 4 goose eggs there. So you're right. Yeah, that was I think a definite positive. And then Jeff Criswell gets a rude awakening in his 3rd outing. First, it was back-to-back home runs on back-to-back pitches to Juan Soto and Aaron Judge. And then 3 pitches later, Giancarlo Stanton, 3 consecutive home runs. I had joked that, throwing up a scoreless inning against the Yankees at Yankee Stadium is a lot easier than pitching in the Pacific Coast League. But then, those 3 great bats in the middle of the Yankees lineup prove that no, it's probably worse facing them anywhere than it is a quadruple A hitter in PCL.
And back to back for the first time since the pandemic shortened season for the Yankees. So and it's something that, again, when you look at where the Yankees are in the standings, and we know that they're going to be battling Baltimore the whole rest of the way, it's going to be a fascinating division to watch. But I really think that those are the things that are going to help the Yankees stand out when it comes down to this battle between those 2 teams is that lineup. If it stays healthy for the next month or so, it's strong. And I don't think that there's any pitcher that really wants to go up against it.
No, and there's no way to work around it. I mean, Gomber was able to do that there, but as you pointed out, it probably took the umpire injury to prevent at least one of those runs coming through, and you just can't live on that kind of a tight wire where you're putting the first 2 guys on with a walk.
And I want to go back to something you said a minute ago, because you talked about how Gomber, I mean, he was on the ropes early on. Let's be perfectly honest. He really was. And knowing there's no off day coming up, the Rockies aren't off again until Labor Day. Having the bullpen not get wasted there in the Bronx and having them come back for this Marlins series that starts tomorrow at Coors. I mean, I don't think you can overlook how important that is. And things like that, again, that's what Bud Black loves about those veteran pitchers. If they can right the ship, if they can save the bullpen, even if it's something that the end result isn't what you want it to be, still that's a big feather in Gomber's cap for sure.
He exits the game down 4-3, and then Bud goes to Jeff Criswell in that spot. So, maybe you wanted to see someone like a Tyler Kinley, but you got to remember the bullpen is already missing their closer in Victor Vodnik. So it's a hard situation in general. As you said, first time with 3 consecutive home runs since the pandemic year. First time that the Yankees have had 3 consecutive home runs in the 7th inning. We're going to cherry pick here. Since 1929, Babe Ruth, Lou Gehrig, Bob Musial, and now here in 2024 with Soto, Judge, and Stan against the Colorado Rockies.
Boy, that's a trio to compare. I mean, that's pretty interesting across the lines, right? But I'll tell you, the way Aaron Judge is swinging the bat right now and the confidence that he has, and I will tell you what Soto is doing to prove his worth for next year and how much the teams are going to have to pay to have him play for them. It is fascinating. I can't wait for this offseason to see what that purse looks like.
When he was traded to San Diego at the 2022 deadline, I was out there covering that Rockies series in which the Rockies made 0 trades and the Padres made all the trades. But Scott Boras was there and talked to some of the media saying that Juan Soto's value to teams was about $1.2 billion. And typically free agents will try to negotiate for about half that. So he was saying, no, in 2 years' time, when he reaches free agency, he'll be worth $500 million. And you have to look and say, I think he probably will get $500 million. And even if he doesn't, he'll still end up getting $500 million because of deferred payments and whatnot. So if you got to pay him $850 and he makes, $10 an hour for the 2025 season in order to defer those payments, they'll figure that out because Juan Soto is a generational player.
He is, and I think that now, you mentioned that trade with the Nationals. I mean, look at the Yankees Padres trade. While you and I were at the winter meetings in Nashville, that happened, and how it's worked out for both teams. It's weird to think that the Padres are maybe a better team without Juan Soto. But the way that they're playing right now with Mike Shildt as the leader, it really feels like that trade worked out well for both franchises.
I don't know how many home runs you thought Judge might have hit this weekend going into the series. 3 felt like it might have been the number, and that's not, an anti-Rockies statistic, so to speak, or prediction. It's just that's how good this guy is. Against anyone, he's going to hit that many. So gets the 1 on Friday, a little quiet on Saturday, 2 again on Sunday, and he's on pace for 63 home runs right now. Now has his third 50 homer season, only the 5th player in baseball history with 50 or more home runs. The strangest part of that statistic is only one of those 5 guys are in the Baseball Hall of Fame. Judge, of course, not eligible yet, still playing. The only one in, Babe Ruth, who did it 4 times. The other 3, Mark McGwire, Sammy Sosa, Alex Rodriguez, they just aren't in because that's the reason why.
We'll leave it at
that. We'll leave it at that. Yeah.
You get the feeling Judge will not be a cuz, though. You get the feeling that he's absolutely going to be in Cooperstown at some point whenever his time comes. But I do think that his presence, you look back to last season with the toe injury that got suffered at Dodger Stadium and everything that's going on, they have a great lineup. And we saw DJ LeMahieu do his thing today as well, and Rockies fans were very reminiscent of what he used to do at Coors. But Judge is the one that stirs the drink. He absolutely is that guy. And he showed again today. I mean, yeah, you don't want to face this guy. I don't care if you're a Yankee, Coors, Kaufman, wherever you are. This isn't the guy you want in the batter's box.
It's wild to go back and maybe look at some people's takes because he had an offer on May 2nd in Baltimore, and his batting average had dipped to 197. Probably a lot of people thinking, oh man, that contract, not so good. No, it's working out okay. And the dude's still playing center field on top of that. So, Aaron Judge is just such a special player. And any time that you are in his orbit, it's a special thing. They were talking on the broadcast. I think Corrigan was just talking about how big he was. And I don't know how much you've had a chance to kind of be around him, probably a little bit at the All-Star game in 2021 when they did the media availability. He happened to walk by, and just behind him, he was big to the point where I literally thought that has to hurt. Like, it just has to hurt to be that gigantic, all that weight on your joints and on your bones. And he just was big. He was just massive. Like, I've never seen football players that big.
Yeah, I covered a Yankees-Orioles game back in 23 at Yankee Stadium, and I remember that night Rizzo hit a home run, Judge hit a home run, so it was something that of course those guys are talking to us after the game, and Patrick, you're in the locker room with me in the clubhouse, that whenever we're all standing around trying to get that sound bite or that video clip, but with Judge it's a whole different thing. So we're all holding our recorders up. It's literally amazing how big that guy is. And again, how he commands the room, not just with his physical nature, but his personality and everything else. I mean, he really is the complete package, it seems.
Yeah, when the Yankees were in town last summer, he was on the IL and still spoke with media and seemed very comfortable kind of dealing with that frustration publicly. And the Yankees were going through it at that time. And in fact, that was one of the biggest highlights of the season last year was, if you remember, extra innings, hot day on a Sunday at Coors Field. I coincidentally had a lot of family coming in from the East Coast celebrating my aunt's 75th birthday. And then they get extra innings and they're kind of dying to get home because it's so hot. And yet Alan Trejo hits that walk-off home run. I think CJ Cron didn't he have a late grand slam to like tie the game? That was a wild one. Another special game. So again, Rockies on the wrong side of a special game.
Yeah, that's a remember some guys whole run through right there. Let me tell you that. But yeah, you think about that Yankees team that was at Coors last year and how different it is this year. And of course, Soto on there, Stanton swinging the bat right now. Judge is back. There's a lot of different things that make this team better. And Rizzo's out with the injury, we know. But if DJ LeMahieu can come back and be that guy like he showed today with those opposite field hits and everything that he does to really kind of set the table for that offense as well. Again, that's a tough one to go through, especially if you're the Orioles or anybody else in the AL East that has to deal with them right now.
It was good to see LeMahieu back in the lineup after taking that ugly line drive off the face before Friday's game. So also strange to see a first baseman batting ninth in the lineup. And then that first baseman is former Gold Glove second baseman DJ LeMahieu. Like what world are we living in? This is strange. I had to look this up because I was very curious. When was the last time the Rockies had 3 consecutive home runs?
Oh.
Do you have a guess at all as to a feel for it?
Yeah, this sounds familiar, but I'm not gonna throw anything out there just yet. But I wanna see what you got.
June 19th, 2018, Nolan Arenado, Trevor Story, Ian Desmond did it against the Mets, Jason Vargas. 8 times in franchise history, they have had 3 consecutive home runs. Before that was 2010, Seth Smith, Carlos Gonzalez, Ryan Spilborghs. 2004, Jeremy Burnett's, Charles Johnson, Matt Holliday. 2002, Butler, Walker, Helton. And then the previous 4 were all Blake Street bombers. So, we need to get back to those days. 3 in a row. That's fun. That's always fun.
And the Bronx Bombers thing got brought up quite a bit today, obviously, with the home runs that were flying out of Yankee Stadium and everything else. But you're right. That was the thing that I was thinking while they were talking about that is, when will we have that next round of Blake Street bombers? When will we actually see those home runs and the fear that there is for the power at the plate, like there is whenever you go into Yankee Stadium right now?
Yeah, the baby bombers of the Blake Street variety is certainly what could be on the precipice here of, with Nolan Jones, Brenton Doyle, Jordan Beck there, Michael Tolia heating up, playing incredibly well. This was the 64th time in Rockies history that they've allowed 5 or more homers in the same game. Believe it or not, it's the second time this year. It also happened in New York against the Mets, oddly enough. Only the 16th time it's ever happened on the road. And I found it a little bit strange that in their first 27 seasons, they had given up 5 or more home runs just 9 times. And in the last 7, since 2018, 7 times. So they're on pace for 1 a year all of a sudden. Post-Humidor, post-PED era, kind of strange that it would go down in that way.
That's a really interesting one. And I think maybe it speaks to, now 2018, obviously, very good year for the Rockies. But it also speaks, I think, to where maybe the pitching has gone through, shall we say, in the last few years as well.
Very true. The pitching was positive on Saturday. I mean, The youth movement was on full display. You had 4 Rockies allowing just 2 earned runs. They were all to starter Bradley Blalock. Only 5 hits. Blalock goes out in his 3rd start with the Rockies, earns his first big league win, youngest Rockies starter to earn their first win since Peter Lambert back in 2019. So that was a really positive one. We'd kind of dipped our toe in that water, I think, during the Padres series over the weekend with all of the young guys. But for the Rockies starters and the bullpen, the young guys, to go out there and do that against the Yankees at Old Timers Day, with knowing that Derek Jeter, Jorge Posada, Mariano Rivera, Andy Pettitte, all those guys were going to be watching them. They got the job done. That was really impressive.
Yeah, I think if there's a day that you can point back to and say this was a positive, maybe of the whole road trip, going back even through the Washington series, but you say this was a positive, it was how much those young guys, as you said, in Yankee Stadium, the hallowed halls of Yankee Stadium, with all those eyes watching them, came through. And I think whenever people will say, what's there left to watch the rest of the year? We know, they're going to be mired in the bottom of the NL West, everything else. That's a perfect example, is how much of these young guys going to develop or lay the groundwork for 2025. And I think what you saw there is a very real possibility of what they could show, not only the rest of this year, but perhaps next season as well.
It was the youngest average age of Rockies pitchers, with 3 or more pitchers being used. 3rd just ever. The youngest was a complete game by Jamie Wright in 97 and 2005. Marcos Carvajal and Jeff Francis combined there July 5th, 2005. So using 3 or more guys They were at age exactly 23. So that was impressive. And you saw the major league debut of Luis Peralta, talking about a great place to make your big league debut. 23 plus years old, became the youngest big leaguer since Brandon Finnegan in 2014 to allow no base runners through an inning and 2/3 or more, while fanning 2 or more in his major league debut.
And they caught him in the dugout, turning around and waving to some, I'm sure, some family in the stands, and you just were reminded right then. Just again, these are young guys, and again, to do that at Yankee Stadium, make your major league debut, look so strong, all these different things, and then still have that big smile, like, hey, look what I just did. I mean, that was a really cool moment, I thought.
Yeah, I think his family were supposed to go to Milwaukee for his brother Freddie's start for an outing, and then they said, "Yeah, I think we've got somewhere else we need to be. It's a little bit more important." And then you throw in the fact that, all right, you've got all these young pitchers. Well, you also have a 22-year-old catcher behind the plate in Drew Romo, first time since 2019. It was the Padres that the team starting catcher and all the pitchers that were used in the game were under the age of 24. And the first time a team had gotten a win with all pitchers, catchers under the age of 24 since the Seattle Mariners in 2012, over a decade. So, again, the youth movement is coming on strong, but it's not one of those wins against the Marlins, which we might see it happen again this week. And we'll preview that series in just a bit. But to do it against the Yankees at Yankee Stadium and sprinkling a little bit of extra flavoring for the old timers day, I really think there's a lot of value in that.
Well, and let's remember, these are two new guys to the organization. Jalen Beeks and Nick Mears gets flipped for these guys. And I think if you had said a couple of months ago, look, here's what the trade value is going to be, and here's what you're going to get, I don't think there's a Rockies fan out there that wouldn't have swapped that. So, kudos to the organization, making a couple of good deals right there. At least it looks like right now. Long ways to go, obviously. But again, knowing Mears and Beeks really weren't part maybe of the long-term plan, and these guys will be, I think that's positive.
Yeah, I definitely didn't expect these guys would be up, making impact so quickly. Partially, Blalock was, had made his debut, but that was out of necessity. He was already on the 40-man roster. Peralta had yet to even pitch in Double-A. So for them to come up that quick, we didn't see that with Victor Vodnik last year. I don't think it was until September till he debuted. Tanner Gordon finally making his debut earlier this year, so he had to wait a little bit longer. So they've been aggressive. Good job on the scouting department for targeting these guys and bring them up. So definite positives. Rockies spoil the Yankees old timers day. Reminded me a lot of last week when the Padres spoiled Todd Helton Day. So, hey, all things are fair and love, and a special day on the weekend at your ballpark.
Yeah, and it's very interesting to me to see these guys that have been a part of recent trades starting to make that impact. And granted, not everything's been smooth, not everything has been perfect by any stretch, but you're starting to see some of these pieces come in, and knowing that there's plenty more knocking on the door as well. And again, I think that there's reason for optimism, just because you're looking at these guys that are showing over this last couple of weeks what they can do and what they're capable of.
Michael Toglia also really being in that group, a little bit older, but still getting his feet underneath him, finally getting regular playing time. Monday will actually be his 162nd game, assuming he's going to start. And that's a pretty good assumption because he's got himself a nice consecutive games played streak. Homers on Saturday, and his streak did end on Sunday. He had himself an offer, but he had an 18-game on-base streak dating back to August 4th. It was the 5th longest active streak in the majors, and he had drawn 17 walks this month, still has 17, but it was the most in the National League by 3 and the 3rd most in the majors, trailing those guys in the other dugout, Aaron Judge and Juan Soto. So patient at the plate, doing damage when he gets an opportunity to. Michael Toglia, almost out of nowhere. I know a lot of people were hoping, right? With prospects, there's a hype to it, and there's also a hope. And you say, hey, maybe this guy can be maybe, until they are just maybes. And now it seems like maybe Michael Toglia truly is more of an R than a maybe.
I like that. And it was really, really interesting to me. I was watching the broadcast yesterday, and I'm not sure if you caught this, but when Drew Goodman was talking about, you look ahead to next season, and he said 3 guys specifically. He said Brenton Doyle, Ezequiel Tovar, and Michael Toglia. And I was like, that's a really interesting thing to pick Toglia as one of the 3 guys that you're looking at as a tent pole already for next season, because I don't think any of us at the start of this year would have put those 3 together. I mean, Doyle's obviously taken a whole other step this year. What Tovar has done, fantastic. But Toglia has really established himself in a relatively short amount of time this season. So for him to kind of be already looking ahead to this is a key guy for next year, and you don't mention a Jones, there's a couple of guys in there you don't mention, but you do mention Toglia. I thought that was a really interesting little note there.
It is an interesting trio, because I want to say you knew that you knew that Tovar was going to be there, but not always. Again, he's super young and he's lived up to the hype so far, but you just never know. He's been that and then some, obviously doing a great job defensively. Doyle taking the step forward, but as you said, Nolan Jones should have been, and seemingly, that guy, and unfortunately injuries just really, has derailed his season, but he's heating back up, just a little bit. Had himself a 2 RBI double on Saturday, had a single on Sunday, stole a base, feeling a little bit more comfortable there. And, he very much could get himself back on track in 2025. And now all of a sudden you can start to imagine that 2025 can be a lot like 2016 was for the Rockies just before they got themselves back to the postseason in 2017.
Yeah. Right now, if all goes well, you've got a Jones Doyle back outfield. I think that's very exciting. Tovar, Toglia, Mac's going to be back. Second base will still be a question mark. And Romo has already shown, he can be a guy behind the plate. I mean, there's no doubt about it. So it feels like you've already got a lot of the foundation for next year in there. And I think if you showed that to Rockies fans, and then you work in some of this younger pitching that we have been talking about that's going to maybe come up through the minors, I think there's, again, is it a playoff team? I'm not sure. But is it a better team than this year in 23? I think absolutely.
I honestly did not see it coming in this way, or coming together so quickly, where it just seems like the influx of young talent and playing really in a positive fashion, that now you say, you know what, maybe 2025 can be like 2016. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Drew Romo getting his first career RBI today. Again, at Yankee Stadium, like, that has a lot of value. Now, you and I know that that's not the original Yankee Stadium,
right,
but hearing so many of the guys talk, whether they know their history, maybe they don't, maybe it's still just like, it's still Yankee Stadium, even though it might not be the original. It still has that cachet. So many of the guys talk about it like that. So that's wonderful for these guys to really get their career started in a big spot to look back on those moments.
And I want to, back to Drew Romo for just a minute, because I think it's really important how much playing time that he has gotten, because one of the big knocks has been they call up these guys and all of a sudden they sit on the bench and they don't get to play. And, and I know some people have talked about Hunter Goodman and Eric Schunk and, a few others who have had that treatment. But for Romo to be really injected into that starting lineup and trusted with the Gombers as much as the Blalocks, I think that says a lot for what this organization thinks about him.
Yeah, we asked Buddy that over the last homestand about, like, how much would he play, and I kind of thought it would be two out of every 5 days, right? Kind of getting the short end of the platoon, but this was his 5th start in, I want to say, about maybe 8 or 9 games. So he's kind of been on the heavy side of that platoon.
Yeah.
So more playing time. Also surprised by that just a little bit. So that's a positive. That's a good thing. You really need to know what you have. The statement of, hey, these things will sort themselves out. Not always. They don't always do that. Also, it can always take longer to sort out if you don't do your end of the deal, if you don't help with the sorting process. And I think now they're definitely in the sorting process, letting these guys play, finding out who do we want to continue to invest in that playing time, because that is the biggest, like, commodity that they have is, hey, how much time can we invest in this guy, because we've got somebody else coming up right behind and we only have so much playing time at this point.
And one thing I'm really curious to see, and I'm not going to be around Coors this week because I'll be out of the country, but there's how much is Jacob Stallings now all of a sudden that mentor? You know, I mean, all of a sudden now he's transitioned from having a teammate and a guy he knew for so long in Elias Diaz to all of a sudden now being the older guy in the room and that veteran to help Romo along. So I think, you know, whatever Jacob Stallings' role is, I'm really curious to hear about that this coming homestand. Again, he's going to get some playing time, but you can tell the future is Romo behind the plate.
And the future, in a way, as your fourth, maybe your fifth outfielders, now probably going to be Jake Cave, who's not a free agent after this year. And you see what he's been able to do as a leader. Certainly once that Dodgers game, that check swing got out of the way, his season totally turned around. And now I think really started to feel like he belongs and is making an impact on these young players. He gets to start on Saturday against his former team that drafted and developed him. Goes 4 for 5, double, home run, a triple shy of the cycle. So when he's getting his opportunity and he's making an impact like that, that is a positive representation. That is a positive example for the young guys on the roster now. And you begin to feel a little bit better with him playing and him getting a start, because it is now much more of a rarity than it was before when he was starting every day and basically almost became the starting right fielder. Now with Beck and Jones back, he is now taking his spot as the first guy on the top step coming off the bench.
And I know there are a lot of people out there like, why is Jake Cave still getting playing time? Why is he still on the roster? I know that there's a lot, but you look at what Jake Cave's value has been this year. And like you said, I think it's a lot to do with leadership. I think it's a lot to do with that veteran presence that you and I both know Bud Black loves to have on his roster. He's never going to have a roster full of just young guys. He wants veterans sprinkled in there as well. And one of the things that, you know, the story that was told today, and maybe you caught this, was that, you know, Jake Cave and Aaron Judge, of course, knew each other coming up through the Yankees farm system. And then Jake Cave introduces Brenton Doyle to Aaron Judge. You know, so just that little, hey, let me introduce you to this guy. And knowing probably that Brenton Doyle, you know, probably a little bit starstruck, probably a little bit like, hey, this is a pretty cool moment. But still, just that little interaction there, and Cave being able to include his young, you know, hopefully future all-star outfielder in there as well. I thought that was a pretty neat thing, and just shows what Cave, that he's always thinking about those younger guys in that clubhouse too.
Yeah, that's such a great story. And you're right about Bud Black and the VP Waltz, right? Is that what we're calling it? The veteran presence waltz? VP Waltz? Is that a thing? Nah, anyway.
I thought you were talking Tim Walls there for a minute. I'm like, whoa, where are we going?
Oh,
here?
yeah. What do you know? The VP Waltz. Yeah, that's what it is, right? It's the dance of having your veteran presence playing with the young guys. We'll float that by Buddy tomorrow. See what
there you go. There you go. But yeah, I you know, Bud loves his veterans, and when it's a guy like Cave that you can tell is very well respected in the clubhouse, you can tell the guys like him, and hey, he has his moments. He absolutely has been a guy that has come through in pinch hit situations. You know, the man of the people moniker that he's grabbed after that Dodgers, as you mentioned. Just there's a lot of things that, while people have wondered why he's on the roster, I think if you take off those sunglasses and look a little deeper, you'll understand why.
Kevin Henry of Just Baseball. Got to preview that Marlins series coming up that starts this week. 4 against the Marlins before the Baltimore Orioles 4-3. That will be an exciting one. But before we get to that, and before we learn the names of a couple Marlins that you or I have never heard of,
I'm curious.
Oh yeah, there's a couple in there. I you know, the Yankee series just got the wheels going in a million different ways. And the one that I did want to pick your brain on is a conversation I had on a show just a couple days ago. Go check that out with Tyler Pador of Blake Street Banner. Anthony Volpe versus Ezequiel Tovar. That was on display just a little bit. 2 guys, both rookies in 2023, both Gold Glove finalists. Volpe wins the award. Tovar does not. One of them plays in the epicenter of the baseball world, whether you like it or not, in the Big Apple. The other one plays in the epicenter of the United States, because the Rockies are just out in the middle of no man's land with nobody around them. What is your take on Volpe, Tovar? Who would you rather have the next couple years? Who do you think is going to have the better career? Does Volpe end up getting the extension that Ezequiel Tovar got this past offseason? What are your thoughts?
That's a great question. I mean, let's start with the extension, because I think it's something that was probably one of Bill Schmidt's best moves, was go ahead and locking up Tovar, making sure he can just focus on where he's going, his career arc, everything else. Volpe's in a really interesting situation because the Yankees have so many guys that are going to get paid or need to get paid. And I think a lot of it becomes then what do they do with Juan Soto? And is there money left over for a Volpe for an early contract or whatever that might be? I'm probably really biased, but I will tell you just the whole package that I've seen. I like what Tovar has done this year, and I like the growth that he's had. Now, granted, I've seen Tovar a whole lot more than Volpe, so I'm absolutely biased, and I know that ahead of time. But still, I think that, one of the last plays of the series, where Tovar made that sliding, dive, or not dive, but knee stop, and then turned and threw out Aaron Judge at first base. A very just solid defensive play that he makes look so easy. And so I think that really, if he was in New York, if he was in LA, if he was in Chicago, somewhere else, that's all we'd be hearing about is how great that this guy is. So I'm probably biased, but I'll take the Rockies guy just because what you've got, you've got him locked up. That he's got that steady mentality, as Bud Black always says, the heartbeat, right? That we love. But I think the future is very bright with Tovar.
The great thing about the balanced schedule, besides for the Rockies, being able to play in the Bronx in a big spot like that, and in front of the entire world watching Aaron Judge, that's good experience for these young Rockies. But it's for other fan bases like Yankees fans. I get that from the East Coast family that I have going, hey, this guy's actually really good. And I sort of wish that I was there at the ballpark today, like you said, after that play going, hey, what was your thought about the shortstop on that Judge play and just all weekend? Like, damn, that guy's pretty good. I think the Rockies have some decent pieces here that could be interesting going forward. Maybe I'm a little bit glad they're more in the National League than in the American League. So that is one of the fun things with this balanced schedule that we currently have.
Yeah, and I think that's where the Brenton Doyles, the guys who are really on that cusp of an all-star bid, I think to have them performing in front of those East Coast eyeballs that they may not see him on a regular basis because of time zone and different league and everything else, I absolutely think that's important.
I'd be curious to see what the experience was like for Brenton Doyle playing center field with the Bleacher Creatures there. He loved going to Fenway last year, and I imagine this year will be interesting with just how rough and how aggressive the fans can be. I hear it from the guys usually when they get called up. I go, what was it like in the Eastern League? When you'd go to Somerset, New Jersey against the Yankees AA affiliate, the Patriots, or when you would go up to Maine and play the Portland Sea Dogs, right?
Yep.
The Red Sox AA affiliate in the Eastern League. So they've had that kind of experience. So this one's a good one. I love what the Bleacher Creatures do with the roll call, right? Yep. For anyone that doesn't know, every single person on the field, they have a special chant, and then each player has a special way of acknowledging the Bleacher Creatures out in right field. And it sort of makes me think like, oh, that would be a fun thing to steal. Like in education, for anyone who's a teacher out there, there's a phrase that's steal from the best. Like if you have a good teacher, someone, take a little trick of the trade and say, I'm going to implement that. So you steal from the best. Would you like to see something like that? The Rock Pile Rebels, going out there, shouting out to all the different players, even the catcher. They acknowledge the catcher who will, doff their helmet, whatever it may be, or should Rockies fans maybe just come up with their own thing and have their own style?
So my hesitation is, and I love that, first of all, but my hesitation is a lot of the people in the outfield aren't cheering for the Rockies when they're at Coors. They've got on blue or orange or red or some other color. So I like where you're going with that, absolutely. But you and I both know there's not going to be a Rockies fan who sits in right field out there for very long among the Bleacher Creatures. They're going to be asked to move or move on their own. I remember going to a game out there and sitting in right field when the Cleveland former Indians came to town, and there was a guy in Cleveland gear who wandered into that section at the older Yankee Stadium. Ooh, yeah, that was a mistake on his part for sure. But I like the thought of doing something for Jones, Doyle, Beck, those younger guys, and really kind of establishing that now and hoping that these are guys that you're going to be doing that with for years to come.
Build some newer traditions. I mean, look, how about this? How about let's meet in the middle? You do it for both teams. So you know what? Now, hey, Cubs fan, Dodgers fans, Giants fans. I mean, insert all 29 teams. You got to also root for or not root, but at least just call out as part of that roll call. I think that would work. And if you need a consultation, like, hey, wait, who's in right field? Just turn to your right. You've got the Jumbotron right there.
See, I like that. But yeah, I was looking ahead to that September schedule, and Cubs, Cardinals, Dodgers coming in. I was like, there's going to be a lot of different colors around Coors for those later games for sure.
Yeah, I don't. Maybe some Diamondback fans actually
very possible. Hey.
To beat the Heat, right? Speaking of traditions, one thing that the Rockies got to experience, which again I'm sure they loved, and they should have. Just like I think the Padres loved being a part of that Todd Helton Day ceremony. Maybe not the ones that were actually working out in left field, running around in center field during the middle of the ceremony. Kind of weird, strange. But Old Timers Day at Yankee Stadium, where they're celebrating the 2009 World Series champions, Jeter, Mariano Rivera, Tino Martinez, older guys, like all coming back and celebrating. They no longer play the game. They stopped that a couple years ago, but having that acknowledgement, we know about Monument Park out in center field there behind the batter's eye, like that acknowledgement of history. It would just be great. And I've said this for a couple years now. There's a lot of Rockies fans out there that talk about that. Affected by Altitude podcast, Skylar and Evan, they are two passionate Rockies fans that would love for the Rockies to have a true Hall of Fame and to maybe retire a couple more numbers, really acknowledge rather than just what they have up in the 200 level and in the suite level. That's cool. That's a great little organization of team history, but a true monument, a true museum, a true celebration of Rockies history. You got a little of that on Helton Day, but you need a lot more of that as well.
Yeah, I was down for the Diamondbacks Pirates series in late July, and that was when they rolled out their first ever Hall of Fame class in Arizona. So they've just started their Hall of Fame this year. And, of course, two pretty good guys to start in there, Randy Johnson and Luis Gonzalez. Pretty good choices, let's be honest here. So, and it was funny because my wife asked, well, don't the Rockies have something like that? I was like, they should, but they don't yet. So maybe with Arizona doing that this year, maybe that'll be a little kick for that to come forward. And I really do think that one of these days when, and you and I talked last time about Charlie's retirement and when that could happen and everything else. And I almost feel like that when that happens, maybe that's the genesis for it to kick off, is that this is a way to honor Chuck and a way to at least do something long before they retire at number 19.
And by celebrating the history, I think you create more Rockies fans and better Rockies fans, because if you're just moving to Denver, you're like, I don't know much about the Rockies, and maybe there's not a lot I need to know because just I haven't paid attention to them from where I previously lived. And then if you go into a monument like that, you can go and see all the history and the Ubaldo Jimenez no-hitter and all these great all-stars and now two Hall of Famers and go, hold on a second. Wow, yeah, they've done a lot in 30 plus years. Yep. You know what? There is history here. There is a good reason to root for this franchise and invest in them because they have created a lot of memories. They've had a lot of really great players. Certainly might pale in comparison to some other franchises, but you're right. If the Arizona Diamondbacks are able to do that, they're 5 years younger. In fact, in 2018, they had a special 20th anniversary little monument that they set up in right field that they had, I think, for much of the season. And that in and of itself was like amazing. And that was only 20 years of history. So the Rockies, pushing 35 here, I think it would be awesome to have that. And even if you just celebrated the 1995 Colorado Rockies, like there are names there. There are stories there that have never been told, and players that, had wonderful lives, during their career and after their career. And I think highlighting that, benefits everybody involved, specifically Rockies fans.
Absolutely. And, you look back, those Mile High Stadium days, the attendance records, everything else. I mean, there's a way to, how the Seattle Seahawks do the 12s, and they honor their fans so much. I think that there's a way that the Rockies could honor the Rockies fan himself or herself in a way, especially tipping the cap to those attendance records back in the day.
There was some talk recently about the fact that some teams will kind of behind the scenes really support a player when they get on the Baseball Hall of Fame ballot, and supporting that player can kind of go a long way. Maybe not necessarily it's going to guarantee a guy who's on the cusp to get that final little push, though the Rockies did sort of at the last minute in the 24th hour retire Larry Walker's number just before, or I made the announcement at least that they were going to retire his number. Had they done that earlier, would Larry have had to wait 10 years? Maybe not. Would Manny Randhawa, Dan Evans, and a couple folks at our Sabre chapter, the Rocky Mountain chapter of Sabre, have to not like do all that heavy lifting and work and say, hey, voters, please pay attention to this. Maybe the Rockies could have had a little bit more credit, even if it was behind the scenes. But I say that because, Troy Tulowitzki is going to be on the ballot coming up. And while I don't know that a ton of people might necessarily say he's a Hall of Famer, it's just to say that getting that support of a team and having that positive relationship can go a long way. I know you might remember only a few years ago, the White Sox and owner Jerry Reinsdorf pushing hard, maybe even not stuffing the ballot box, but at least getting a lot of people that were on the board that year of that year's Veterans Committee and help getting him into the Hall of Fame, despite the fact that, as a DH, there's not a ton of designated hitters in the Hall of Fame. But if you look at a statistic like JAWS, which ranks players all time, Harold Baines didn't have 500 home runs, didn't have 3,000 hits, 78th best right fielder of all time. He's in the Hall of Fame because of that support from his team.
Absolutely. And I think that having that team support is so important. And, you mentioned Tulowitzki, and we know that there's still probably some fences, I think, that need to be mended there between the franchise and Tulo. And don't know the whole story there, don't want to know the whole story there. But I think that there's a lot of things that can be done to show it's kind of a new day. And whatever happened with Tulo in the past, you're still a Rocky. You some of your greatest moments were as a Rocky. And absolutely, here's how we're going to support you.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, so Baines ranks 78th all-time as far as right fielders go, even though he was a DH. There's no DH version of JAWS. But to give you an idea of what that might mean, he's like, there's a lot of really great right fielders. He's just behind Shin-Soo Choo and JD Martinez and just ahead of Nick Markakis and Hunter Pence. And he's a Hall of Famer. So with some support, I think there could be a couple more Rockies that find their way into the Hall as well.
And I think that's the key, with some support. And again, did Baines playing in Chicago, did that help? It's possible. But at the same time, I think that you've got to have that champion working behind the scenes.
It's true. Yeah, I was having some fun because there's a couple folks at the ballpark when you get to talking, and it seems like the last 3 or 4 times I've talked to this one dude for security, awesome guy, love him, and he brings up Andrés Galarraga, and I was like, hey, I've been saying that he's got a much better case, I think, than people realize if you go back and look at his numbers. Problem was he was part of that PED era. Not a problem for him as far as PEDs are concerned. Never linked to that at all. But the fact that there were so many other guys that were ahead of him on the depth chart as far as superstars are concerned, I think that was Todd Helton's issue too, right? Also being behind an Albert Pujols. But when you're like the third best first baseman in your league, you're not going to make the all-star team quite as many times. You're not going to be in the discussion as far as the all-time greats. But Galarraga has a case. You look at his similar batters. There's 4 or 5 guys that had similar careers as him that are in the Hall of Fame. And I was looking around to not fudge some numbers, but I love playing around in StatHead on Baseball Reference. And you can't do this for every player. So I already know there's some people going, well, you could just say how many players have ever done this, that, this, and this on a Tuesday. And all of a sudden, Kevin Henry and Babe Ruth are in the same sentence. Like,
very similar. Very.
We're not talking about that. We're talking about legitimate numbers. So only 2 players have ever had a career batting average of 288 or higher. So close to 300, 399 or more home runs, very close to 400 plus. Stop laughing. At least 1,425 RBI, almost 1,500. That's a lot. And have been hit by 178 pitches. Only 2. One is Andrés Galarraga. The other, Hall of Famer, Frank Robinson.
I mean, if that doesn't cinch the vote, I don't know what's going to, man. I'm just telling you.
Right? But look, it's something. It is something. Something.
There's no doubt.
It's a thing. Yeah, I don't know. Galarraga someday
It's
might be
awesome.
a while, and Galarraga's got to help himself too. You got to start showing up to certain events. He's kind of been a bit of a ghost, even to some of his friends that he played with. All right, let's talk about the Miami Marlins series here because we are contractually obligated to do that. No, 4-game set with the Marlins, and you got a cast of characters. We don't know who's going to start on Monday against Edward Cabrera. Tuesday, 6:40, Cal Quantrill versus Rodri Munoz, who was pretty good against the Rockies when he faced him earlier this year. Wednesday, Kyle Freeland against Max Meyer. And then Thursday, Bradley Blalock versus Valente Belozo. Yes, that Valente Belozo. Any idea who might get the start on Monday? I don't know if bullpen seems kind of rested, and they got a ton of long relievers there. Maybe you go straight opener, or
It's
you do the
possible.
bullpen day thing, and Noah
Yeah.
Davis gets a bulk of those innings. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's very possible you get a Davis Lambert, or not Lambert, but yeah, a Davis. Absolutely. I think that's a very real possibility.
Yeah, this will be an interesting one where you say, maybe the Rockies can win one at home. They have been playing very well at home for the second half. So, this will probably end up being a split. The Marlins are one of those pesky teams. It seems like whenever they come to town, they'll have a big game. Jesus Sanchez hits one up onto the
Bingo.
rooftop. There are those games. So, hard to know what to expect this week ahead of that Orioles series, which, of course, will get previewed here on the Rockies Insider. Minor League Minute, Chase Dollander. I mean, fan 10 over 5 on Friday night. His 5th 10-plus strikeout start of the season and first at Double-A. He's a dude where it's been a year plus, was pretty much shut down for all of 2023 once he was drafted by the Rockies. Has looked really good. No real rush for him to make his debut, especially where he sits in the depth chart. As far as his future with the organization, he's probably atop that depth chart for young pitchers. But with all the guys that they've got right now in the rotation and for next year, and with a bit of a crunch here on the 40-man roster, I don't know that we see him make his debut in September. I like the odds of a Carson Palmquist a little bit more.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think there's any reason to rush it through, especially with the roster crunch and everything else.
Carson Palmquist. Now I'm drawing a blank as to when his last start was, if it was Wednesday night or Thursday night, because there's a chance maybe he's the guy who gets the ball on Monday.
Possible.
Yeah,
that would be interesting to see. It's possible.
I'm trying to dig up his page here at the last second. I'm thinking, okay, that's good. Minor League Baseball, MILB.com. Sometimes when you look at players' pages, it doesn't load immediately, and that can be very frustrating. You just have to reload it. First world problems. August 22nd was his last start, so 23rd, 24th, 25th, not enough length.
Yeah.
Let's go Noah Davis as our prediction.
I think that's fair enough.
Reliever Zach Agnos, who's been someone that's been working his way up quickly. 5th save of the season for Hartford on Saturday night. 15th overall save in the season. Had 10 with High A Spokane. Has a combined 1.42 ERA in 38 appearances this season. Another lively arm for the Rockies bullpen that's going to be a factor here going forward as they get themselves back to relevance the next couple of years.
Yeah, and again, you want reason for hope? Look at some of these guys. Look at some of the guys who are turning into dudes in front of our very eyes here at the minor league level. And absolutely, does that translate to success at the major league level? No, but it's certainly good to see some of these stats and what these guys are putting up on their way to Coors Field.
Senzatela made his second rehab start with High A Spokane earlier this week, 3 shutout innings. That's positive as he recovers from Tommy John surgery performed last July. And that kind of piggybacks a little bit in the conversation with Lucas Gilbreath, who on Sunday was only able to get 1 out, gives up 3 hits, allows a 3-run home run to Gleyber Torres, coupled with his previous outing where he did not record an out at all, also gave up 3 home runs, no strikeouts yet in 3 outings since his return. What's your level of concern right now for Lucas Gilbreath?
High. It's very high. I mean, I'm taking it with a grain of salt in the fact that, granted, he's worked his way back. There's still a lot of things you've got to go through and everything else, but he just hasn't looked that competitive while he's been out there. And so I think there's some cause for concern for sure.
And because of the previous setback he had with Tommy John surgery, That's where more of my concern is, because when guys come back from Tommy John, they might be ready, but they don't have their best stuff. So these kind of things can happen.
Yeah.
So that is within the realm of possibilities, but because of that setback earlier this year when he probably was supposed to return maybe late April, early May, that didn't happen. Needs to go back out on rehab again. That's why you have that concern. And I'm sort of curious. I've had this thought. I don't think I've mentioned it yet on the pod. Do the Rockies have a Tommy John surgery problem? Maybe not the surgery so much. Is it the rehab? I don't know, but they've been really proud of the fact that they haven't had a ton of guys on the big league level that have needed Tommy John surgery. Now they had the 3 minor league guys last year that needed that. You know what? That I don't necessarily pin something like that on the Rockies, because they were already damaged product, so to speak, damaged goods coming into the organization. So that's not the Rockies doing something wrong or not preparing these guys after years of work in the minor leagues. But you think back to the setback that Peter Lambert had after he had his surgery during the pandemic season in 2020. Kinley has really leveled off fairly well after a rough start late last year. So we saw those growing pains. We also saw it early on this year, and he's been a lot better. So I think that one's been fine. But with Lucas Gilbreath now, with Herman Marquez being shut down for the rest of the season, that's kind of troublesome early returns for all 4 of those guys. That makes you say, is there something more to that? I don't know. It is a small sample size.
It's small, but I think it's something definitely worth monitoring for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah. On this day, actually on Sunday, August 25th, Jeff Francis made his debut in 2004. Eric Young Jr. made his debut in 2009. And on August 26th of 2014, I don't know if you remember this game, Madison Bumgarner, dominant performance, retires the first 21 batters in order before a leadoff double to Justin Morneau in the 8th, gets the next 6 batters for the 3-0 shutout, 13 strikeouts. Man, remember that guy? That guy?
Yep. I remember that guy and ATV, but that guy was good. Let me tell you, whenever he was on the mound, he was something, man.
He's only like what, 33?
Yeah, that's just it.
It's crazy that both him and Tim Lincecum pretty much wrapped their careers so early. He turned 35 earlier this month, Bumgarner, so he'll probably be on a Hall of Fame ballot before he's 40, just like Tim Lincecum, just like Prince Fielder. Like too many of these young guys, having their careers wrapped up a little bit early. A couple more on this dates I think that are interesting. August 26th, 1998. Phil Garner earned his 500th victory for the Brewers, making him the only skipper in Milwaukee history to reach that milestone. Craig Counsell, in his 9 years at the helm for the Brewers, is the all-time leader in manager wins with 707. And so that naturally made me think, Kev, how many other active managers rank number 1 for a franchise? Maybe not their current franchise, but a franchise.
Ooh, that's a good one.
I feel like that's an interesting one.
That's an interesting one. I
looked that up. Bruce Bochy, 951 wins for the Padres. Okay, forgot he had a whole life before San Francisco, before Texas. Kevin Cash, 804 wins. He passed Joe Madden earlier this year for most in Rays history. Craig Counsell, 707. Torey Lovello, 568, most in Diamondbacks history. So that's 4. And then we've got close but no cigar, Bud Black. He's approaching. He needs 11 more to tie Clint Hurdle. Do you think he gets to that number this year? Will he get to the magic number and be the franchise leader for the Colorado Rockies?
I say yes. I think he will. I think the Bud has that September schedule. I think that it's it's a good possibility, especially with the way that Atlanta has been struggling, going on the road with the Braves. I think you look at the rest of the schedule. I think there's some opportunities there, no doubt.
It's going to be tough. It's going to be close.
Yeah, it will. It will. No doubt about it. But hey, maybe he does it against his old buddy Dave Roberts in that final series of the season when there's going to be a lot to watch.
Yeah, maybe Dave is like, so how many more do you need?
Yeah.
I could give you 2 of the 3. I don't know if I can give you all 3. That's funny. So also close but no cigar, Scott Service. He was second all time on the Mariners list, trailed by 159 wins, but alas, recently let go by GM Jerry Dipoto. So he will not end up as number 1 in that franchise. And then Dave Martinez, 450 career wins. That's the most by a Washington Nationals manager, but because that is a franchise that previously existed as the Montreal Expos, he's actually 4th, believe it or not. So I found that interesting. Felipe Alou, most in Expos / Nationals history. All right, before we get out of here, what are your thoughts on Shohei Ohtani doing some otherworldly things? A walk-off grand slam to get into the 40-40 club on Friday night. I know it's a couple days old. By the time you're listening to this, he may already be in the 50-50 club. Is the whole, hey, he's a DH, he shouldn't win the MVP? Is it just that it's this year? Is it just that it's Shohei Ohtani? Is it the fact that he's stealing as many bases as he is? Is the whole, he's a DH, should we probably just put that to bed at this point?
I think we should. I mean, whenever Edgar Martinez made it in the Hall of Fame, I think but he's a DH argument went out the door, to be perfectly honest. I think Ohtani and Judge are doing their thing. I think that they are going to be pretty locked in for the MVP. I know we have friends that may disagree with that in some ways, but I think that just because Shohei isn't pitching this year doesn't mean he's not worthy of that, because, my God, the Dodgers are, they're keeping up the Diamondbacks and the Padres right now. What if Shohei wasn't doing this? I mean, he has absolutely been the bedrock for the Dodgers this year.
And I think a incredible MVP-like season as a DH, you go, all right, other DHs have had MVP-like seasons, but an MVP-like shortstop on a team that needs their contribution, that's going to have a lot more value. But as you said, the Dodgers have absolutely needed him. He's gotten support, right? We know Freddie and Mookie are there, but he's been critical there throughout the Mookie Betts injury. And the fact that we're not talking an MVP or MVP caliber season. We're talking about a historical season in general. And, it's hard to put my finger on exactly where I sit with this today with the whole DH thing. If you're healthy, you're going to play the field. Like, there's not a ton of guys who steal bases. I think there's been 3 whoever as a DH have stolen 20 or more bases. So that in and of itself is a rarity. It's not just a good DH season. It's a great season that just happens to be a DH year.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And I think that, if that's going to be what keeps Shohei out of it, first of all, just Shohei, the person, the player, the phenom, all that stuff, plus playing in LA, I think that those 2 things right there, I just don't see how that he doesn't win this. I really don't.
And who else is challenging him? That's the other piece, is that it's just one of those years where no one is really challenging. We had it a little bit there for about, 48 hours with Ketel Marte. We still have it with Marcell Ozuna with the Triple Crown, being right there. But Marcell Ozuna, also a designated hitter. So it cancels out. We'll see.
I think the Marte injury locked it up for Shohei. I would absolutely think that. Now, if Shohei were to go down and for some reason, we'll see.
Yeah, maybe Mookie Betts gets back into that conversation. We'll see. Kevin, go ahead and plug away. You do great work, so people should check it out everywhere you live.
Hey, absolutely. Patrick and I are glad to be part of Just Baseball together. I'm actually going to be in Chicago Tuesday night for the White Sox and Rangers, which will be an interesting one with the Sox losing their 100th game now. So we'll see how that goes. And I will be thinking about you at Coors Field while I'm over in South Africa this week.
Yeah, that's going to be a fun one. Take a lot of photographs.
It'll be interesting. I appreciate it.
Enjoy the cuisine. Are you going to have something that's even stranger than the grasshoppers that we had in Seattle?
You know what? So you know what I'm going to have that you're going to be jealous of? So I connect Chicago to Ethiopia to South Africa. I am having the Ethiopian coffee ceremony in your honor.
Wow. That is cool.
It'll be pretty
Love
cool.
me some Ethiopian coffee.
Yep.
That's
The bean belt,
that's
baby.
the bean belt. Yep. Single origin Ethiopian. That's my guilty pleasure there. I hope I'm your guilty pleasure at Rockies_insider, at Patrick D Lyons, or at Patrick D Lyons MLB. Thank you again for everyone that's been supporting the pod, helping make this a top 200 Apple Podcast baseball shows that are out there. So love all that support. That goes a long way. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you for all the momentum. But you know what I like to say, and nobody else, because this is about podcasts, and that's just how I roll. That momentum, it's only as good as your next show. So I'm probably going to talk to you Tuesday. See you then.